I have very seriously thought about looking into and investigating why Slabinski was awarded what he was awarded, given that his write-up directly conflicts with the ISR footage.
Will this be a potential of the first Medal of Honor that's ever been rescinded in U.S. military history?
You have an embarrassment that occurred. You had someone that was given a Medal of Honor, Slabinski, that likely should not have been given it, given circumstances, testimony, and the ISR footage. When no one was looking, they were willing to basically spit in the face of the family. I'm telling you right now that if the museum does not do the right thing, that they are going to bring a terrible reputation on their own museum, and they should probably change the name to the Medal of Dishonor Museum.
Welcome back to the channel, everybody. And as you can see today, we are extremely privileged on the channel to have on Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna from Florida's 13th District, also Air Force veteran. And we are here to talk about what is not a new thing to the viewers of this channel, and that is the John Chapman Museum debacle. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Congresswoman Paulina has been doing a lot of work on the backside of this, helping us as we try to, basically have the right thing be done on behalf of John Chapman and his family regarding the museum. So, Anna, if you don't mind just telling the viewers how you got involved, because they may be interested to see a congresswoman jumping in on behalf of John Chapman and the family as well.
Yeah, so I'm married to Andy Gamberski, who's a CCT Air Force veteran, and everyone within the combat control and even pararescue community, as well as Air Force-wide, knows the story of John Chapman. First and foremost, for people that are tuning in, we all know that he's the first ever recorded actual via eye in the sky Medal of Honor recipient, which is the historical significance of that is unprecedented, right?
Yeah.
But then you have this aspect of him being a quiet professional, a combat controller who ultimately made the utmost sacrifice, and now bringing it to the current conversation is now being openly disrespected, in my opinion, by the Medal of Honor Museum, which, can I just add in there, every single Medal of Honor recipient will tell you about what they did with, it wasn't about them, it was about their team, except for in this particular instance, which brings us to probably our next topic of discussion, which is Slabinski.
Yeah, and so everybody, just quick background, Congresswoman Luna did a great job of sort of summing that up. But yes, John Chapman was not only being disrespected now by the museum, but this controversy goes way back to this happening. Initially, the Navy tried to cover up his death, tried to stop him from getting his Medal of Honors. And the big controversy here is that Britt Slabinski, who also has a Medal of Honor, will be given one of the premier 200s exhibits at the museum, while John Chapman, and I've showed it in a previous video, I'll probably edit it in, gets a tiny little picture as part of a timeline. And so it's kind of the second time that John Chapman's been disrespected by the Navy and his family as well. So if you don't mind, could you tell us a little bit about what you've been sort of investigating with this? Because for what we've been doing, obviously, to where we're at currently, guys, sorry about that, and I'll let you pick up here. But where we ended was that we exposed this from happening on my channel, and we got a response from the museum, generic response, wouldn't address Slabinski or anything like that. But the Chapman family got a response, and I showed their emails about how the museum has confirmed John Chapman will not receive a exhibit, but Britt Slabinski will. And then at that point, as far as I know, everybody involved has been completely ghosted by the museum. And I think they just figure their problem is just going to go away.
Yeah, I think you nailed it, right? I think with us kind of, and to my husband's credit, he was really tracking this. Obviously, everyone across the board, this is not just like combat controls versus Navy SEALs. To be clear, everyone who was in the special tactics community, I'd say like 99.9% of them, are in favor of John Chapman receiving the same recognition that Slabinski's getting, and also too think that it's really, really foul that the Medal of Honor Museum has taken this case specifically to the level that they've taken. I can tell you just kind of with how I was introduced to it, obviously it was flagged for my husband, and then looking into it, look, one thing that I've learned as a congressional investigator and a member of House Oversight is when you have facts out there, right? So like, here are the facts. John Chapman received a Medal of Honor. He was killed in action. His ISR footage says a very specific story that directly conflicts with the write-up that Slabinski was given the Medal of Honor for, which is the first thing. The second thing is whenever someone runs away from something, instead of confronting it head on with facts, and also given the fact that, again, Chapman's no longer here, he has family involved, he left behind a wife, he left behind his children. I mean, these are very real things.
Yeah.
So not only does a family have to, live a trauma knowing that they lost their significant other, they lost their father, their husband, their family member, and he was a friend, teammate, all that. But then they're going to be then disrespected on top of that. So when we first started messaging on it, I basically, like, I'm very straightforward. It's wrong what they're doing. They need to fix it, right? And so initially we started making calls on social media for the Medal of Honor Museum to do the right thing. And, Andy started getting chirped at by some people that knew Slabinski or knew about the situation. Granted, a majority of people were in support of what we were doing, but there were people that were close to him specifically that were saying, Britt's a good guy, all this. I'm not saying Britt's a bad guy, but what I am saying is that it's extremely disrespectful the way that the museum has basically brushed us under the rug. And anyone who's been a teammate in that position, or if you have served in the military, would understand that you don't just get a Medal of Honor for doing something on your own. There's a joint team effort there. The right thing would be for Slabinski to advocate that John Chapman, who, again, a historical figure, the guy's a total badass. I mean, look at the footage for yourself if you haven't seen it. Why is he not advocating for him to get the same recognition, right? Like, what, are they going to show a picture of him on a slideshow? Like, that's such a slap in the face. And then why would they then send people to talk to me at my congressional office, knowing where I stand? I'm not going to stop advocating for this because it's the right thing to do, and then still choose to not do the right thing. Look, they have a museum opening, I think next week. Yep. I say people should show up and make their voices heard, because in them disrespecting John Chapman, they're disrespecting the Congressional Medal of Honor. Remember, I said Congressional. Right. I have very seriously thought about looking into and investigating why Slabinski was awarded what he was awarded, given that his write-up directly conflicts with the ISR footage. And I think that goes into politics in the Navy, and they brought politics into something that should have never had anything to do with the Air Force, whether it was inter-service BS, whether it was incompetent and unqualified people that were in positions of power. Whatever it is, it should not take place. There's other Navy SEALs who back me on this, and so we're going to continue to ask questions.
Yeah, and I want to caveat on what you're saying there. With this story, it's the real reason, and let's just call a spade a spade, the real reason why the Navy did this to begin with, why they tried to cover up Chapman's death, why they tried to make the SEAL Team 6 the heroes of all this instead of the real hero, John Chapman. And like you said, John Chapman, and he's also the first Air Force and only Air Force veteran to win the Medal of Honor in the Global War on Terror. So if we just talk about you have 200 exhibits at this museum, and you're going to tell me that after a 20-year global war on terror, the first Medal of Honor, which actually he really has two Medal of Honors, Britt Slabinski has his second Medal of Honor, if we're going to be honest, the first Air Force veteran, and also the first one to be caught on camera ever, that's not historically warranted to be good enough for the top 200 museums. But the Medal of Honor of the SEAL Team 6 commander, who literally left him for dead and admitted he left him for dead, right? He literally said, I thought he was dead, so I left his body. He's going to receive one of the 200 Medal of Honors. And it starts, the controversy gets a little bit deeper here, right? Because if you start to look at the board of the museum, who's on the board? Britt Slabinski is put. So it's almost like he's putting himself in for the award. But if we go back to the original event, Britt Slabinski is the SEAL Team 6 commander on the ground. Okay, that mission is an abject failure for SEAL Team 6 all the way around. There's a lot of heroes in that, right? But there's one main hero. That's John Chapman of that story. But what does SEAL Team 6 need to do because it's a failed mission? Well, they want to cover it up. And how do the SEALs do a lot of things when they fail missions? They make it a hero story about some Navy SEAL. And what they decided to do was, well, we can't have an Air Force combat controller be the hero and all our SEAL Team 6 guys running away from the gunfight. That doesn't look good. So we got to cover this up. We got to try to basically drag Chapman's name through the mud, drag his family's name through the mud. And then, if that wasn't bad enough, when it's finally time to honor the guy, after we already gave him the Medal of Honor, now the museum, who's being run by a bunch of Navy SEALs, right? The CEO is also a Navy SEAL. And so, like I've had some buddies that have sent me texts that are SEALs that are part of this museum and that have sent me, it's like, yeah, it's the Navy SEAL National Medal of Honor Museum. That's what they're calling it because the five Navy SEALs who have Medal of Honors, all 5 from the Global War on Terror, they all get one of the 200 exhibits. So it's just, to me, it's ridiculous.
There's Navy SEALs that disagree with the disrespect of Chapman and have disagreed with Slabinski doing what he's doing because, to be clear, if I were to sit on a board, I would never say, no, don't give him one. He's not here to advocate for himself. But please give me this exhibit. I mean, that's the first issue I have. But then the second issue, which I think is important for context, is the Department of the Navy went to try to block Chapman's Medal of Honor.
Correct.
Okay? So, and then the footage comes out. And then the footage directly conflicts with the write-up for Slabinski. So look, there's some very serious questions. Remember, this is not the Department of the Navy's Medal of Honor. This is the Congressional Medal of Honor. So what I'm saying is that give John Chapman the respect and give the family the respect that he's deserved. You guys call yourself the Medal of Honor Museum. So do the right thing by him. I'm not saying all Navy SEALs are bad. There's other Navy SEALs that have understood and they are advocating for Chapman to as well get fair representation at the museum. But what I find a problem with is when people make things political. And in my opinion, having looked at this holistically and having heard both sides of the argument, right, what I think is that you have an embarrassment that occurred. You had someone that was given a Medal of Honor, Slabinski, that likely should not have been given it given circumstances, testimony, and the ISR footage.
Yep.
Now you have a position where he's being honored, but they don't want to showcase Chapman because Chapman to them is a reminder of a situation that they don't want to have to relive.
Exactly.
To be clear, that entire situation was likely the worst day in these people's lives that they'll ever experience that. And I can't begin to comprehend that. So I'm not saying that there weren't brave things done at that point in time. However, the fact is that John Chapman was left for dead and that he fought it out. He was a hero and he died as a man fighting until his last breath.
Yeah. And when we talk about an investigation, the special operations community, as your husband knows, it's 99.9%. Everybody knows the story. Everybody knows the truth. And we want accountability for it. And now what I think needs to be investigated with Slabinski's, okay, because I actually have Valor Awards. I know how this process works, okay? To receive Valor Awards, there has to be eyewitnesses, or in John Chapman's case, video footage. So we don't just get to tell a story and then somebody gives you a Medal of Honor. You have to have people write up dissertations. I've had to do them for all my teammates in their Valor Awards. Eyewitness accounts, and they have to corroborate each other. So my question is, we know from the video footage that none of that Medal of Honor, I went through it in my videos. I said, here's his Slabinski's Medal of Honor. Here's the video footage. Where is any of this? None of this is happening. So your argument has to be this happened off camera somewhere, I guess. But then who are the witnesses? Let us see all of the corroborating witness reports that go through that Medal of Honor. That's what I think, because then you've got to have people justifiably say, I watched him do this. And I don't think anybody's going to be willing to do that when they know a camera watched the whole thing. And we all know it didn't happen. And you're right. There's a lot of valor in that mission, not just Chapman. But where there isn't valor, and to me, as coming from a guy who did this and been in situations not as bad as that, but you don't just leave someone behind because you think you're dead. That is an excuse to me. It's never been acceptable in the United States military or special operations. You look at Black Hawk Down in Mogadishu, how many soldiers we lost just trying to recover bodies of pilots, and you just bail? I don't know, man. There's nothing valorous to me in that story as a leader who's in charge.
Well, what's interesting is, speaking to that, I actually had sat down recently with CBS. So there's a story that's actually going to be coming out about this because of the fact that the reporter specifically knew what CC2 was, knew about John Chapman, and then was like, why the hell? And this is a civilian reporter. It's like, why the hell would they not honor him? Like, this is so weird and such a weird metaphorical hill to die on. Like, why would you choose this of all things? And he was saying that it was interesting how the political aspect of the inter-service beef, whatever it might have been, really is taking this, what should have been a historic and heroic event for Chapman. And it really, all it's doing is it's a big black eye on the Department of the Navy, and specifically to
Yep.
SEAL Team 6, right? Like, we know that there's some great stack dudes out of SEAL Team 6, but this is not reflective of that. So why would they allow this individual to drag them through the mud to allow this type of situation even to transpire? I've talked to an individual of Chapman's family, and what I will tell you is the way that the Medal of Honor Museum interacted with me is way different than
Yes.
how they interacted with the family.
Me too.
And
Yep.
I think that's because they don't want the pressure publicly, but then also too, it's now being elevated to a congressional level. And I can tell
Right.
you that I have had personal conversations with many members of Congress that are Republican Navy SEALs, and not one of them's advocating on behalf of the Medal of Honor Museum.
Right.
What does that tell you about the position that the museum's in? Do the right thing, guys.
Yeah, and I said this from the very start of this because the museum, the CEO, Chris Cassidy, Navy SEAL, reached out and sent me an email right after I put out the first video, sort of really exposing this in a big way. And it was your generic response of why John Chapman can't be honored because there's not enough room and there's only 200 spots. Wouldn't respond anything about the Slabinski stuff. But then, like you mentioned, I got the email chain between the email from the family and the museum sent to me, and I went through the whole thing, and it was much, much different. They were very forward in saying, yeah, John Chapman won't be honored, and Britt Slabinski will receive one of the 200 exhibits. And not only that, the Chapman family was trying to get them artifacts and things like that to go with the exhibit. The museum told me the Chapman family refused to provide them any. And in that email chain, it has the family messaging the museum trying to find a way to get those artifacts to the museum. So I don't understand why this was such an easy problem to fix. Immediately, had you just responded to my first one of, okay, this is not good. There's optics on this. There's a couple different things we can do. Honor them both together. I think that would have been a very good way to do this, right? Two Medal of Honor winners. Nobody's going to be upset about that. John Chapman gets honored. Slabinski gets honored. It's not a knock on SEAL Team 6. It's about the event. Or you and this is where I think I have the biggest problem with this, is the fact that when we talk about the Medal of Honor, there's Medal of Honor winners who are with us, and there's those who aren't. So to me, why is a sitting member of the board who's alive being honored in the first 200 exhibits for the same event and mission, but the Air Force combat controller who was killed in action is not going to be honored for that? Really, in the first 200, we can't give that first one to the guy who was killed in action, and then maybe on the next rotation we bring in the guys that are alive. To me, that makes it far, far worse that a guy who's on the board and alive will be like a premier exhibit, but John Chapman won't. That really doesn't sit with me very well.
I'm telling you right now that if the museum does not do the right thing, that they are going to bring a terrible reputation on their own museum, and they should probably change the name to the Medal of Dishonor Museum, because really what they're doing in this I'm serious, they're doing in this entire event is they're taking that medal and they're turning it political, and it is a slap in the face to everyone who is on that board, to everyone that is in that museum being displayed, because of the fact that they are handling this in such a grotesque way. What I will also tell you is that, again, our communications have been pretty straightforward. Do the right thing, showcase, and I actually asked for the same thing. I said, just equal. If Britt still wants to be in there, then make sure that John Chapman, you guys have the first ever recorded footage. Why would you not put that somewhere in the museum? I mean, it's so simple to do. But, not even have them do that, the bare minimum. To me, I would just tell people that if they're going to do that and behave that way, just make a note of it, leave them Google reviews. But guess what? You don't have to go to it. And definitely, I'm considering seeing if we can do something on the National Mall to get a separate, maybe, monument for Chapman. But, that's nor here nor there. The fact is that the harm's already been done, the disrespect to the family, the disrespect to the community, not to mention you're now looking at these write-ups. look, again, as I stated earlier, when someone wants to run from conversation, they want to run away from something, it usually means they're hiding something. And so, me as an investigator, I like to pull on that string and see what I can uncover. And I can tell you right now, it stinks to high heaven.
The next thing I want to talk about, because we've talked about, Slabinski, the questions about his Medal of Honor. Obviously, the footage doesn't show that he did supposedly what he did. Then becomes the question, okay, if there's going to be an investigation in this, and it turns out this was just a political Medal of Honor that was given, a Congressional Medal of Honor just given out to try to save face, and the investigation shows that, will this be a potential of the first Medal of Honor that's ever been rescinded in U.S. military history? Is there potential in that? If we acknowledge, yes, this Medal of Honor should not have been awarded to this guy, what do we do next? I mean, that's a huge, what I respect the most about you as a politician is this is an issue that a lot of people, vast majority of politicians, would not touch with a 20-foot pole. And the fact that you've jumped on board and you're so staunch and helping us and defending us, but that's kind of where the severity of this could very easily lead to if this gets looked into deeper. What's your thoughts on that?
It's literally just anyone that you talk to. Like, I've talked to Navy SEALs about this. I've talked to Green Berets about this. I've talked to many people within the special tactics community, to include people that are around Slabinski that also have the same sentiment that I have. So what does that tell you about the position? I would happily go and make that argument because of the fact that I have facts. I'm not just looking at something and coming to a conclusion based on nothing. Here are the facts. I've just reiterated that to you. So that is why I'm calling to question, should we launch the investigation? Which, to be clear, I talked to, again, another member of Congress who's a Navy SEAL, and he said, look, straight up, I wouldn't really want to get involved with that because it's not good optics. I said, but it's not good optics to give out awards to people that don't deserve them, and it's certainly not good optics to have a report that directly conflicts with the ISR footage. Yeah. I mean, did they ever anticipate that the ISR footage would come out? I don't know. But the fact is, insult to injury, you have someone that then dies, and then you are trying to hide the actual person that did deserve the medal. I mean, it's so crazy to me. So look, whether or not the museum is going to do the right thing by next week, I think that you have probably some tricks up your sleeve and what you're going to be doing to ensure that they do it. But I'm not going to be quiet on it. I'm not going to just be like, oh, you came by my office, or you contacted your husband and told me to chill out a little bit. Like, sorry, I don't work for you. And also, I'm a vet too. And I happen to have been married to someone that literally got shot. I take that shit seriously.
Yeah.
I don't, you just willy-nilly give out these awards. And honestly, after talking to the family especially and hearing how they're hurt over this, they already were hurt once by losing him. And then they go and do this. I mean, talk about, I don't know how anyone could on that board would be willing to back what's happening currently. It's not right.
Well, and then it kind of makes you wonder, like, who on the board really knows about it or is paying attention to. At this point, they have to be. I mean, I
think they all know now. Yeah.
I mean, my video was on foxnews.com, so somebody, like, most people have to know. But yeah, I mean, the museum comes out next week. There's been no response. I haven't heard anything back that they are planning on making any changes, that John Chapman will be honored more, or an actual exhibit, that Slabinski's won't. So then becomes the question of moving forward. If they just open with it, they just shove it in everybody's faces and say, we're too high and mighty for you, we don't care. What's the path forward at that point? Are you considering actually looking into an investigation into that?
Yeah, so my motto and just how I basically conduct myself in Congress is, if you can't go around, you go through the front door. And I feel like it's kind of one of those situations, and you go through the front door. And I think that you'll also probably be pretty effective in that sense with just keeping up the pressure and having them do the right thing. But I mean, I've also shared this publicly with people that I know, talk to some of their board members. And, I've also stated it publicly to CBS. This is, again, the Congressional Medal of Honor, and you have information directly conflicting. You have, again, someone insult to injury that's no longer here, can't even advocate for himself, that has been rightfully awarded the Medal of Honor. But then you call into question, well, Britt, if you're a teammate and a true teammate, why would you not want to honor your brother? And I think
that's the craziest thing to me.
Everyone's asking.
Yeah, and I think what's saddest, the most sad about this whole thing is this is a big event. the brand new Congressional Medal of Honor Museum. This is a huge event. This is a huge museum. They're doing amazing things. And this is going to overshadow all of it. If the museum thinks that if the museum thinks that there won't be people showing up in shirts that have not great things to say about Britt Slabinski at that museum, like an opening day, you guys are out of your mind. Like, this is going to overshadow everything. And unfortunately, that's like, no one wants to disrespect this museum. Nobody wants to disrespect all of the Medal of Honor winners who are being honored, but we're not going to let a group of Navy SEALs that just decided they get to do whatever they want. It disrespects John Chapman again. Like, we're not in the special operations community, the veteran community. We're not going to allow it to happen. And that's sort of, I mean, the petitions we've done. I did a poll where I just said, who should basically receive the first of the 200 exhibits, John Chapman or Britt Slabinski? And it was like 10, 15,000 votes with 99% to 1%. It's not this isn't a 60-40, he said, she said. It's not what this is at all.
I mean, I literally, telling you, like, even just on posts, people are just like, as a Navy SEAL, I'm really upset to see how the museum's conducting themselves. Why is John Chapman not being honored? I mean, anyone, if you haven't seen the footage, highly advise you to check it out. It's honestly heartbreaking at the same time because you're seeing
it's hard to watch.
But when you see him continue to push forward and do what he does, I mean, like, you can't put yourself fully in that position without having gone through it maybe yourself. I never deployed, so like I'll never know what that's like, but I could imagine he was probably thinking about his family and that he wasn't gonna, because there's just a point where you just know you're not going to come back. But then you see that now it's not just like in Navy versus Air Force. There are people in the Navy that are saying this is wrong, fix it. And so look, at the end of the day, the Medal of Honor Museum, to my knowledge, is privately funded. However, there's donors on that board and donors that give to the museum that also don't like what's happening. So I think that whether or not they want to admit defeat now, I think that they've already lost the battle in the court of public opinion, but also the facts are on our side. So we're going to continue to put top-down pressure and bottom-up pressure, and I'm sure you'll be very helpful with that.
Yeah, we're not done. I guess since we are live and we got a bunch of the viewers here, like, again, big thanks to Anna for you coming on and talking about it. But this is sort of the launch pad of this week, because this whole week is going to be big names and potentially SEAL Team 6 operators themselves coming on, just like you just said, to say, no, we think John Chapman should be the one honored, right? So, and the Chapman family will be coming on this week as well. So yeah, we're going to put optics on this thing. And there's I keep saying this, like, there's an easy, like, conclusion to all of this. It's not hard, museum. Just like you said, do the right thing. It's not a difficult decision. I know it's like a little bit of egg on your face. You got caught. You got caught, right? Like, you didn't expect the Chapman family. The Chapman family initially put this out. Lori put this out on a Facebook post, and thank God I got sent it and that I have a platform, because otherwise it would have the museum would have just hosed them and said, middle finger to you guys. Like, what are you going to do about it? And that's what was going on before everybody stepped in.
Yeah, and that's honestly what's kind of terrible. It's like, who are you when no one's looking? And in this sense, the people that are supposed to be on this board that are looking to bring recognition to all of these otherwise very heroic men, when no one was looking, they were willing to basically spit in the face of the family and spit on the reputation and the service of Combat Controller John Chapman, who received the Medal of Honor. And as a result of that, we're now having this conversation. The right thing to do, again, would be equally show an exhibit next to Britt or wherever you want to do it, but give him the credit where it's deserved. By the way, Britt, you're on the board. You should be advocating for this. You shouldn't be hiding behind that and having your friends contact me or my husband. But aside from that, I think, again, this brings up to the question of, how do they make it right? So I think that, when you have, for example, a child and the child's sick and you want to make the child better, you have to force them with medication. I feel like that's kind of force feeding them the medication to make them get better. Yeah,
and you're right. And, I mean, we know a lot of the same people with access to the people we're talking about. And I've had some of my friends tell me that the same people in charge have called them to talk about, like, oh, well, why is Valhalla doing this? And why are people doing this? And it's like, and they literally said, here's his number. You could
Yeah.
call and
Well,
talk to him. And
yeah.
guess who I haven't heard from? Any of the people involved. And again, I'm not trying to, drag these guys through the mud, but the reality is, like, the truth is the truth. And one of in our generation, the global war and terror generation, and I have a very storied legacy in my family. My grandpa jumped into Normandy on D-Day in World War II. My dad was a Green Beret in Vietnam in the A camps. I was a Green Beret. And so war heroes mean something to us and to you, to all veterans. And John is one of our generation, the global war on terror's greatest heroes. One of the greatest heroes. I mean, it's hard to find a Medal of Honor story more impressive when you watch that. And so, yes, I think this isn't just important for John and his family. I think this is very important for the country as a whole to understand that no, we're not going to disrespect our war heroes. We are going to make sure that the Congressional Medal of Honor, Valor Awards, all of these things are not political tools, right? They're not for covering up stories. They're for honoring the veterans who've gone before us in the right way. And I think that's what has to happen.
Yeah, I fully agree. I also too think that, the museum, from what my perspective was hoping that this would just go away and die off and that there wouldn't be
Yes.
commentary on it. And little did they know that, one of the biggest news affiliates in the country is actually now doing a documentary on it, or at least
Yeah.
and a massive, massive investigation because of their lack of surprise leadership in regards to this entire thing. So,
Yep.
look, I know that been a lot of bad things that happened specifically to that day. And I do think that looking at how important military leadership is and how important also to after the fact caring for your troops, caring for your teammates. I mean, this literally is a telltale example of why leadership is so important because in
Yes.
Exhibit A, B, and C of all this conversation, everything that we've discussed, it goes back to the leadership and the lack thereof. And so I'm just hoping that they do the right thing. Again, I would highly encourage everyone watching this to get involved with whatever tricks you have up your sleeve. And
Yep.
frankly, we'll just go through the front door on it.
Yeah, and the museum, I can guarantee you, is going to see this episode. And so, just realize, like, we're not done. I know you thought that we were sort of, it's kind of died down for the last month or two. But obviously, as you can see, I have Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna on my show right now. We have not just closed our eyes and said, oh, well, okay. So again, museum, do the right thing.
People should make their voices heard on this specifically because sometimes the only way to force people to respond is by getting involved. That means
Yeah.
grassroots campaigns, all of it, right? So, like, now I'm taking off my congressional hat and just talking to you guys as a vet. And I can tell you, as a vet, it is disgusting how they've
Yep.
conducted themselves with respect to not just Chapman, but his family. And so I would just encourage all of you to make your voices heard, whether it's going to, you know, various outlets, whether it's going to their social media accounts, because that is a factor in all this. And again, there's a simple solution. Okay, this is not bowling. This is just simply calling
Yeah.
into question why would you do this and not the other thing. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that probably wrap it up. Thank you very, very much, not only for coming on, but for being a part of this. Again, there are very few politicians who make you feel like they actually care. And to show that they actually care is jumping in on an issue that is not necessarily politically beneficial in a lot of ways, right? When we talk about rescinding a Medal of Honor from a SEAL Team 6 operator, right now, granted, this is a different situation, but it's very impressive to me that you've been so willing to do it and you're serious about it. This isn't some political thing for you. It means a lot to you. You're kind of the perfect person for it, right? You're Air Force veteran. Your husband was a former CCT. You're in Congress. So thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it. It's been great talking to you. And yeah, that's it for this one, guys. And in the live, congrats on that. But we're logging off now.
cool. Thank you.
Yep.